All right, so let's dive right in. Clean energy, it's making headlines, and for good reason, right?
Yeah.
We're going to unpack this awesome CBS News video all about it. And trust me, some of this stuff is seriously eye-opening. First off, get this. The U.S. is on track for like record-breaking clean energy production in 2024.
Wow.
And I'm not talking some small jump. This is a seismic shift. We're talking 20 gigawatts of new clean energy capacity added in just the first 6 months of 2024. To put that in perspective, that's enough to power like 15 million homes.
That's incredible.
A lot of juice. Now, you might be thinking, okay, natural gas, that's still king of the energy hill, right?
Right.
But guess what? There's a new sheriff in town, and it is solar power.
Yeah.
Solar is absolutely exploding, making up almost 60% of all the new power generation capacity that we've added this year. We're even seeing these massive mega solar projects popping up, especially in Texas and Florida.
I was going to say what's interesting here is it's not just about adding more solar panels, right?
Right.
It points to like a fundamental change in how we're generating power in the U.S. We're shifting away from fossil fuels, and that has huge implications for like everything. From climate change to the economy, it's huge.
Yeah, it's not just a sunny outlook for solar energy, right?
Yeah.
It represents a much bigger shift in how we think about and produce energy. And speaking of game changers, let's talk about battery storage.
Okay.
It's also seen massive growth, accounting for about 20% of new generation capacity. What's the big deal with batteries, you ask? Well, think about those giant wind turbines you sometimes see out in West Texas, let's say.
Right.
They're spinning all night, generating tons of power. But here's the thing. When demand is low, like when everyone's asleep, all that extra energy, poof, gone, wasted. That's where batteries step in. They're like giant energy savings accounts, storing that excess power so it doesn't go to waste. Then when demand surges in the morning, everyone's making coffee, turning on lights, boom, that stored energy is there, ready to go.
It's so true. And what's really exciting about battery storage is that it directly addresses one of the biggest criticisms of renewable energy sources like wind and solar. You know, their reliability, right?
Right.
The sun isn't always shining, the wind isn't always blowing.
It's true.
But with batteries, we can smooth out those peaks and valleys, store energy when it's abundant, and use it when it's needed most. This makes the entire grid far more efficient and resilient.
So batteries are giving these renewable energy sources a major, major reliability boost. It's like they've got backup singers making sure the performance never skips a beat. But of course, it's not just a two-man show, right?
Wow.
Nuclear power is still a factor, although it's not expanding at the same rate as renewables. For example, there was the recent opening of a fourth reactor at a nuclear power plant in Atlanta.
Right, and that's interesting because it highlights the complexities surrounding nuclear power. While it offers a carbon-free source of electricity, it faces its own set of challenges, right? Building new nuclear plants is expensive and time-consuming, and then there are the regulations and public perception to consider.
It seems like there's always a trade-off, isn't there? But that's what makes this whole discussion so interesting. It's not a simple case of one energy source being like good and another being bad. There are so many factors at play. But one thing's for sure, simply adding clean energy to the mix, it isn't enough.
Yeah.
We also need to talk about what's being replaced and how quickly we're doing it.
It's like you got your old car, right? Gas guzzler.
Yeah.
You wouldn't park your brand new electric car next to it and call it a day, right?
Right.
You got to retire that gas guzzler eventually. Same thing with our energy grid, right?
Yeah.
Adding clean energy, super important, right?
Yeah.
But we also got to actively like phase out those fossil fuels.
So it's like we're juggling, right?
Yeah.
We're bringing in the new while phasing out the old. What are some of the big hurdles in making that transition happen?
Well, I mean, there are definitely logistical challenges. Our current energy grid, it's built around fossil fuels. And transforming that infrastructure, well, it takes time, it takes money, and it takes a lot of careful planning, right? We got to invest in things like upgrading transmission lines. These are like the highways of the energy grid to handle, you know, all this renewable energy we're bringing on.
Yeah.
And then we also have to develop like smarter grids, ones that can manage the variability of sources like solar and wind. It's not always sunny, you know what I mean?
It's like we're not just switching out the appliances, we're rewiring the entire house.
Yeah.
And we're doing it while the lights are still on.
That is a great analogy, yeah. And let's not forget about like the human side of things too. This transition to clean energy, well, it requires a skilled workforce to build and operate all these new systems.
So it's not just the technology, it's having the people who can make it all work.
Absolutely. We need to invest in like training and education and make sure we've got enough qualified workers for this, you know, this new energy economy. And that's not all. We also need to consider the communities that have, for a long time, relied on fossil fuel industries. We got to make sure there's a just transition for those workers and communities as we move towards, a cleaner future.
So it's multi-layered, right? You got economic, social, and environmental factors all kind of intertwined. It's not just about flipping a switch. This is a long-term process.
Right.
And speaking of long-term, what about new technologies on the horizon? Any potential game changers we haven't even talked about yet?
Oh, there are always exciting developments happening in the energy sector. One that's been getting a lot of buzz lately is small modular reactors, or SMRs.
Ah, yes. Those pint-sized powerhouses. We talked about nuclear power earlier, but these SMRs sound like a different breed altogether.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
So imagine instead of building one massive reactor, right?
Right.
You build several smaller, modular ones. They're like the Legos of nuclear energy,
Okay, I like where this is going.
These smaller reactors, they have the potential to be cheaper to build. And you can deploy them in locations that might not be suitable for those giant, traditional plants. They could be game changers for remote communities or industries that need a dedicated on-site power source.
More flexibility, potentially lower costs. Are there downsides to these SMRs? Every superhero's got to have their kryptonite, right?
Of course. SMRs, they're still a relatively new technology. There are definitely questions about their long-term cost effectiveness and how we would deal with the waste disposal, right?
Right.
And some critics argue that, focusing on SMRs could take resources away from investing in renewable technologies that are already, further along, like your wind and your solar.
It sounds like there's always a debate about the best path forward.
Yeah.
Right? It's a good reminder that there are always trade-offs to consider and no easy answers. But that's what makes this whole conversation so fascinating. It's like we're putting together this giant jigsaw puzzle, right?
Right.
With the energy future of the entire country.
Mm-hmm.
And the pieces are constantly changing. New technologies pop up. The old ones, they evolve.
That's a great way to put it. And what's even more interesting is that there's no right answer. No one-size-fits-all solution. The future of clean energy, it isn't about picking one winner, right?
Right.
It's about finding the right mix. Solar, wind, batteries, maybe even some of those SMRs, who knows, right?
Yeah.
And that mix, it might look different in different parts of the country, right?
Yeah.
Depending on their needs and resources.
So instead of a one-man show, it's more like an ensemble cast, each with their own strengths and weaknesses all working together.
Exactly. And that's what makes this so exciting, this energy transition. It's a dynamic process. We're seeing crazy innovation, incredible progress, and this is really just the beginning, Right. We have a real shot at creating a cleaner, more sustainable future.
It feels like we're on the edge of a whole new era of energy, one that's not just about, keeping the lights on, but about doing it in a way that benefits everyone and the planet, right?
Absolutely.
Well, we've covered a ton today. From those soaring solar installations to the potential of those compact nuclear reactors. It's clear the transition to clean energy, it's happening.
It is.
There are challenges, definitely. But there's also this sense of momentum, this feeling that we're moving in the right direction.
I think so.
That's something to be excited about. Thanks for joining us on this electrifying journey into the world of clean energy. Keep those questions coming, stay curious, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.